So hello everybody, thank you for coming back to our next session. So I'm sure everybody's heard the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast. It was a phrase made famous by Mark Fields, who was a president of Ford at the time. My take on that is that culture eats digital for breakfast, and any public sector organisation that disconnects the two is putting their success at jeopardy. We've had some great keynotes today already talking about the fact that digital isn't the responsibility of IT, it's everybody's. And a key component in success is creating the right environment to enable successful transformation. Before even looking at technology, it's culture and leadership that you need to get right. So our next conference session is called Digital and Culture, Chicken and Egg. We've got two speakers who are going to talk to you for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to follow that up with some question and answer session. So we've got Councillor Neil Pryor, who's the Cabinet Member for Transformation and IT from Pembrokeshire County Council, and we've got Geoff, Howsego, recently Director of Strategic Change at Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service. So if I hand you over to Neil to start off with.
So I arrived as a fresh-faced, enthusiastic councillor in Pembrokeshire 2.5 years ago, nearly 3 years ago. And 9 months later, I was able to put £600,000 direct cash investment into the technology department, protect them from budget cuts for 4 years at a time when every other department was experiencing cuts. And I'd like to talk to you about my experiences, try and be helpful and share some insights, and also talk about councillors. My name is Neil Pryor, Independent County Councillor and Cabinet Member for Transformation and IT at Pembrokeshire County Council in West Wales. I'm also the Welsh Local Government Association's deputy spokesperson for digital, and recently a deputy chair of the LGA's Improvement and Innovation Board. Have we got any councillors in the room before I start? I did notice 2 on the delegate list, which kind of tells you quite a lot, really, doesn't it? So I can speak freely then. Okay, good. So, as I said, I arrived as a fresh-faced, enthusiastic, living the local government dream councillor, was invited to join the cabinet a couple of weeks later, and felt like a kid in a sweet shop because I just saw a whole world of opportunities for change. And whether you call it transformation or change or business improvement, I don't think it really matters. The point is we're trying to change. I inherited a programme that felt like a list of projects that didn't really feel like it had a great deal of momentum behind it or leadership, and so set about trying to simplify that. And when I became a new councillor, the council was going through political change. I had a chat to the new leader, or the new leader-elect, and spoke to him about the need to maximise on the technological revolution that was happening around us, which is why he invited me to join the cabinet. And nearly 3 years on, he's very happy with what I'm doing, by the way. So that transformation programme, I wanted to simplify it and put 3 things at its centre. The first was the technology revolution. So I'm going to use the words digital and technology, ICT, interchangeably, but I wanted to put technology at the top of the office and at the heart of what we were trying to do. And that's really a very simple strategy around agile digital people. It was quite a baptism of fire, really. My second cabinet meeting, we had the IT strategy presented, and it felt like a list of IT projects, and I approved it on the basis that we would take it back 6 months later and simplify it, and that's what we did. And our strategy is a strategy on 3 pages, and it's about agile, digital, and people. The second strand of our transformation programme is the cultural transformation. And so this is about the values and behaviours. It's the who do we want to be as an organisation. And we've done quite a lot of work on that over the last couple of years around defining those behaviours. And it's one, we want to move to an organisation that is based on learning, purpose and results. So being innovative, being very clear on why we exist, and being able to deliver real outcomes. And the third bit was what I call the relationship transformation, which is about us becoming far more relevant to the communities that we serve, remembering why we're here, and also forging a new relationship with our staff, our partners, our communities, our citizens, our customers, and it's really about the purpose. So I'll come back to that a little bit later. But I'd like to talk you through really how I got that investment, and it's a story, you know. So I had that IT strategy. I have recently, subsequently spoken to the head of IT, who told me that he felt very disappointed when I rejected it, or approved it on the basis of it being revamped within 6 months. He's subsequently told me how delighted he is that we did that because we got some investment. But what I did was spent some time understanding where the organisation was in its use of technology, spent some time with officers, I spent some time with councillors, and I realised that I could use the political process to build support for what we wanted to do. So I went and took it to the Policy and Pre-Decision Scrutiny Committee, which is, like most councils, we have a mix. It's still massively non-diverse. So the average age of the councillor in Wales is 60. I think it's slightly younger in England, but we've still got a big issue. And one of the objections I hear from people is that older councillors don't get it. Well, I had older councillors on my scrutiny committee, and I took them through a story about the fourth industrial revolution. I showed them the Internet Minute. I gave them some examples of what other councils were doing. I gave them our context, and actually I used some Socitm benchmarking information that the head of IT had provided me with to show that we were actually an underfunded IT service. And I put the case forward that we needed to close the gap. I showed them what the world of possibility was. There were no business cases there. There was nothing in there that said we are going to do X, Y, and Z. But what I did was told them a story and gave them a vision about how we needed to close that gap, and I got unanimous support. So that's kind of what I see my role as, really. You know, as I don't know what your relationship is like with your councillors. Sorry, I'm just flicking through the slides here. I'll just take that back. We're there, I think. But I approached that from a point of view of trying to tell a story. Really importantly, I try to translate. So what I see in IT departments and teams, and I've worked with them for many years, I worked in the technology industry myself, is that we can be very good at talking about networks and firewalls, but actually translating what that means to an outcome is the really key bit. I saw my role as building support, so I did all my stakeholder management. You know, I spoke to officers, I had a few arm wrestles, I got the right people to support what I was trying to do. I obviously spoke behind the scenes before the scrutiny committee because that's how it works. And I was able to find my allies as a result of that and build the case for that investment. I was taking political accountability, which is what I need to do. I need to represent the portfolio. I've got a vision that's been bought into, and I want to see technology at the centre of that, so that's what I did. So that's your role as well, really, whether you're a head of IT or a director or whatever your role might be. I see it as the same thing. You know, to get digital or technology further up the agenda, it's about telling a story, it's about translating, it's about making sure you build support, taking time to find your allies. And a word on councillors, really. They generally have stood for right reasons. I don't agree with everybody in the chamber, but we've all got something in common. We went out and knocked on people's doors, and we built support, and we persuaded people to vote for us. We might have very different views, but generally, we're doing it for the betterment of our areas. So they want what's right. They might need hand-holding, especially when it comes to technology. And in fact, there is a real appetite for this. So I bumped into Kate, who I met at a digital and data masterclass for councillors recently with the LJ. There's an appetite there for councillors. They want to understand about this stuff. They won't always support you. But it's about finding your allies. We're not all bad, even though some of us are. I do despair sometimes. Please don't tweet that, but we're not all bad, okay? So back to the basics, really, and back to that transformation program. Some of the stuff that we do under that technology stream is stuff that we do. But really, you know, you've probably all heard that digital is not a thing, it's a way of doing things. So the technology strategy is about a way of doing things. It's not really about the wires. Culture, I like to define as the way we do things around here, which is very similar to digital. They're so closely interlinked. And so that's what we're trying to do is encourage permissions, encourage confidence, encourage people to take responsibility in leadership, encourage people to do safe-to-fail experiments, little things. They don't have to be big technology projects. Just little things can make a huge difference. And the relationships is really important. It's the why we do it. So there's this stuff around some of the what we do. There's the how we do it, which is our culture, which is our digital mindset, but it's got to be related to the why we do it. So I started off a couple of years ago with a technology at the heart of what I was trying to do for the council, but it has really become about culture. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you about digital as a, got the wrong slide there, haven't I? Ruined my finish. Digital as a means to, digital as a catalyst for cultural change. Thank you.
So good morning. As Sandra said, my name's Geoff Howsego. I currently work for Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, also work with Isle of Wight Council and with the National Fire Chiefs Council, where I'm the lead for research and development for the UK. Now, my background is in people management. Why I've ended up in research and development is a question you can ask me later, but I've got my heart in HR with people and my head in technology and what that can do for us as a sector. So if it's true that culture eats digital for breakfast, I did have eggs this morning, so I'll leave you to work that one out. But I think we're all in a world where change is inevitable. It's inexorably coming to all workplaces. And something that we're all having to adapt to. I think there is increasing acceptance that the new power relationship in organisations is between those responsible for technology, ICT, digital, etc., and HR. So you're tying together the people and the technology pieces. That's something that CIPD is currently quite active in and working out how that works best. I've been in HR for over 20 years, and I can see there's been a significant change over that period of time. Certainly when I started, the IT department was something that was over there and rarely did HR, business partners, and your IT specialists do much with each other apart from argue. Life is now very, very different. So what I wanted to look at today is really the experience that we had within Fire and Rescue Services in Hampshire. And really looking at that, I was trying to think about the transformational change pieces rather than the small incremental improvements that we make that just allow us to do our day-to-day job a little bit better. So the bigger pieces that affect everybody. I think that the key learning over the 12 years that I've been with Fire is that change in relationship, that dynamic between technology and people. And it has fundamentally changed. So I work with Fire, and actually it's a really good place to work. Let's face it, everybody loves a firefighter. It's one of the most trusted professions that you will find. And we obviously have no problems when it comes to things like recruitment. I can put an advert out tomorrow for 10 places, and I'll probably get around 2,000 applicants. Our challenge is the people that apply. The diversity of those applicants hasn't changed in 12 years. And so there are real challenges for us in terms of our people in Fire. I used to work in mental health. The challenges there were quite different. So actually bringing the two together has been an interesting challenge. I think the other key issue for Fire is the comfort that firefighters have with change. It is a very traditional and hierarchical organisation, and whilst that brings incredible strength, it is also a significant challenge when it comes to bringing in new ways of working. There is active resistance in some areas, and you'll have heard stories around the Fire Brigades Union. They're a very powerful union and look after their staff particularly well. But they can be a challenge when you're trying to bring in new, innovative ways of working. So what I'll describe to you here is Hampshire's journey over the last 12 years, which is not necessarily typical of all fire and rescue services. And it's provided there for discussion and hopefully questions. So, when I took on responsibility as HR director about 12 years ago, there was a number of things that I felt we needed to do. Having worked previously in health and then in Whitehall, I brought with me some knowledge and experience of working with large-scale programs. The service thought it was really good at managing change, but it had no infrastructure. It had no way of managing it. So the first thing we did was to introduce a structured approach to project and program management. That immediately raised the profile and the importance of change management, and using some of those cultural things, i.e. the hierarchical nature of what we did, I convinced the Chief Fire Officer it would be a really good idea if he was to chair a monthly portfolio meeting of all the programs and projects that we were running. Suddenly, change was incredibly important in the organisation, because the Chief was going to ask you questions about your program if you're a program exec or one of the key projects. We also established a post in our media and comms team around internal communications, specifically angled at business readiness, preparing people for change. Wasn't something that we had done before. We tried to instill some behavioural norms through our senior leadership to get them to model the behaviours that we wanted. But that wasn't going to be enough. So as an HR person, there's some hard measures that we started to take. We included change management and change readiness in our annual PDRs. We looked at our job descriptions and person specs, made sure change management was in there, and responsiveness to change. And then our assessments around promotions. We wanted to make sure that there was key capabilities and competence around change for the new people that we were promoting into leadership positions across the whole organisation. So there were some hard measures that we put in, but the most powerful ones, I think, are the softer ones. So engaging early was really important. There was quite an adversarial relationship between managers and the FBU in particular when I arrived. So building trust with the unions was really important. And amongst other things, one of the things that we did that did cause great consternation, mainly amongst managers, was to invite union representatives onto the programme boards. Because previously they wanted to keep the FBU out of it because they thought they would block everything. Actually introducing them and bringing them into the decision-making process fundamentally changed the way things worked. We did the same with our representative bodies, our equality groups, etc., got their early engagement, and obviously staff themselves. And that early engagement is a mantra in the organisation. It includes, at the early stages of any kind of change project, whether or not that's setting up the user requirements, product specifications, etc., getting them then involved in the user acceptance testing, not just your usual suspects, but the people that you know are going to be most vociferous in their complaints. Get them involved early. That was a key issue for us. And then asking them to carry out assessments and product trials, and getting them involved in that, and taking notice of what they said. There was no point in us asking them to do that if we then ignored the findings that they came up with. Now, that takes a bit of bravery, and we had to make sure that our senior managers were signed up to that, because if we hadn't accepted the recommendations, we would have completely undermined that trust that we were trying to build. Now, a lot of this and the co-design of solutions means that individuals have an ownership that previously they wouldn't have had. It would have been something that was imposed. Now they've helped to design this, so they have a vested interest into owning and making the new system work, whatever that might be. The other thing that was prevalent was selling things, telling, rather than having an adult-to-adult conversation and simply explaining what the systems were, what they could do for you, and also being really honest about some of the downsides that transformation might take. Because otherwise it would, arguably come as a surprise, and that people would have relatively little time to adapt to those issues. That honest and open approach we found has worked really well. And I don't want to give you the impression this suddenly happened. This has taken 12 years from a point of high levels of confrontation in the workplace to areas where we have relatively good relationships across the piece, and people are open to talking about change. They don't still like the change, but at least they're open to talk about the opportunities. And working with our customers internally about how to mitigate any of the downsides, particularly any disruptions. The other thing that we found, particularly with one of our ICT transformation programs where we've moved into the cloud, there was obviously going to be some disruption, because I'm sure that we're not alone in a major IT program not running exactly on rails, and there were some significant issues. We were really honest about those. We were honest about the length of the delay or the disruption that would cause, and we asked for people to help us. And we were surprised at the amount of support that we got and the acceptance that there was some delays, and people were finding workarounds. They were phoning the help desk and saying, we found this workaround. And we were then able to populate that around the organisation. So it can work. The other thing around any kind of change is the amount of stress that causes. And there's been quite a lot of work done around research about the causes for stress. And control is one of those key determinants. The more control people have or feel they have in the workplace, the less they will feel stressed. So what we've tried to do in all of our programs is hand over control and decision-making to users wherever possible. Now, obviously, that isn't in the technical heart of ICT, but some of those things that go round it, we've allowed people to make the decisions. And that has been incredibly powerful. Again, going back to my earlier point, it means they own the change. We've also used workplace champions, and you'll probably do this yourselves, using the normal hierarchical, the normal chain of accountability. That works, but there's also some key people in the organisation who are organisational influencers, people that other people listen to because of what they do, how they are, their knowledge, their experience. We tried to get those people in as champions to help explain the changes to those that were working in the organisation. The final piece really is around the role of help desks, and I use that term quite widely. That's not just somebody on the end of the phone. For us, it was people going out into the business, going out onto our stations. We've got 58 stations. Each one has 4 shifts. They work 24/7. We've got a number of on-call firefighters who are never there during the working day. So we've had to be quite creative about how we provide that help and support, and a very different level of skills, knowledge and experience in the use of digital and ICT generally, from those that are super users all the way through to some of our retained staff, our on-call staff, who have very rudimentary levels of IT technology. So we found that having the right people in the help desk is really important. Yes, they've got to have some technical experience and knowledge, but it's their ability to engage with and understand what the firefighters and other staff did that was the critical factor, understanding what their needs were. So that lays out, I guess, some of the key pieces of learning, and it might seem quite random, but it isn't. Each one of our programs has a detailed business readiness plan that goes underneath it. That is now normal practice. As I said earlier on, we put in a system for project and program management, and one of the expectations is every program has a business readiness plan. That has become a behavioural norm. People expect to see it, and people expect to resource that properly. And that fits in and is part of an overall approach to overall cultural change, one of which is being open and honest with our staff and giving over control and responsibility to our staff wherever possible. What we have found with that is they have gone much further than we would have dared to. Because the staff are helping develop some of those solutions, the national approaches that some of our unions have got, which would be to protect existing systems and processes, have been forgotten because our staff have designed the systems that best help them and suit their needs. So the other thing I suppose to mention, and you would expect this from an HR person, do think about the change curve. Think about the human factors. Take that customer-centred approach. We do like systems thinking, and many of you will have seen or heard some of those approaches. They work incredibly well in the environment that we've now got, because it's very customer-centric. I do think, really, just to finish off, the underlying culture, which Neil sort of identified as the things, how we work around here, will take a long time to change. And we still have some areas of our culture that is resistant to change. Some of the things people don't want to move away from. They're more like traditions, they're more rituals, perhaps, than anything else. That's probably the best way of describing them. So you do need to carry on and continue with that leadership. And that leadership is critical throughout this. You've got to have that resilience, you've got to have that determination, and be clear about what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. So none of what I've said is a technical solution, but you wouldn't expect that, hopefully, from an HR person, because I'm not qualified. But the people will help you if you give them the tools and you hand over control to do it. That is our experience in Hampshire. That was incredibly countercultural when I arrived 12 years ago, where it was almost an arm wrestle every time you wanted to make a change. We don't have that same arm wrestle now. So investing now, for your future development does give returns. Certainly that's what we found. So I think that's probably us. Open for questions.
Richard Rollins from Basingstoke. You mentioned the critical importance of a business readiness plan. Could you just outline that in terms of maybe the 3 top questions you would use to put to the organisation?
Yeah, so there's certain elements I would always expect to see in there. One is around training on the new system. Another one is around equipment familiarisation. And the second one is around policies and underlying systems that need to change. The timing is absolutely critical on a business readiness plan. If you do it too early, people will have forgotten it. And if you do it too late, they'll feel rushed and will not feel that they've had enough time to adjust their thinking. And there is, I can't give you an answer of what the golden time is. Each project or program will probably have its own. But if you can dedicate some time and utilise potentially peer trainers rather than somebody that's parachuted in, that also has a significant impact, because you're learning from somebody you trust, perhaps one of these organisational influencers that I mentioned, that's going to help you be really good at the new system. And at the end of the day, that's what most people want to do.
If I may, it's more of a comment. I just wanted to say to Neil how refreshing it is to hear you stand up there as a politician talking about the leadership and management of change. I think that, you know, without doubt, I mean, it's actually, I spent years in the public sector and left, and actually that's my work now, because that is what is key for me in terms of delivery of successful digital solutions. And it's fantastic. I mean, it was wonderful to hear that from you, and I just hope that you are in a position to, you know, coach and encourage other politicians to do the same, because I think there'll be less money wasted, less burnt out people, and more successful councils, in my opinion. So thank you.
I'd just say thank you very much for the encouragement. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So just another question for Neil. There's often a culture within local government, I've been working in local government for 14 years now, something, of fear of councillors. So senior management will often jump or be asked, made the request from a councillor to jump, and then the response is how high, often from senior management. And often it runs contrary to sometimes the understandings within IT teams, within digital teams, as to what priorities have already been set. And so I don't know if you've got any recommendations for how we can engage with councillors to get them to see what it is that we're trying to do, rather than just putting ideas that they've put forward. Yeah.
It's a fascinating area, isn't it? Because you have some councils that are very member-led, which is exactly that. You know, how high shall I jump? You have others that are more officer-led, where you've got councillors who are trying to take more of a leadership role. I mean, that's certainly my experience. That's what we're trying to do, is do the right thing by our county. The fear factor. I'd say I don't usually do quotes, but it's the seek first to understand, then be understood. So I think that there's something in trying to understand why people have stood, and they stand. That's probably the starting point. They might stand for very different reasons. You know, I've done some work with councils across the UK, and some councillors got elected because they had campaigned against a bypass. Some are very community minded. Personally, I have had to work at the community stuff because I was more corporately minded. In fact, I campaigned on making the council better. That was one of my key election messages. I think we're all people. So it's about, and most of us have, not all, but we'll have a digital footprint. We need to engage with the electorate. You can start to find out what they're interested in, who to steer clear of, because some of them are quite dangerous. And some of the behaviours, and it goes for officers as well. So it's human nature, isn't it? But it's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of figuring out who are the people you can start to build a relationship with and start to have those influencing conversations. And what I mentioned in my short speech was around the translator. That's really important, to be able to translate what that means from a technology point of view into outcomes linked to what the councillor might have stood on in the first place. I hope that helps. Happy to chat later. That helps.